Welcome to Immigration Insider with your host, Attorney John Nicelli. This podcast is an educational forum on how to deal with complex aspects of immigration and pitfalls to avoid. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, johnnicelli.com. Now here's the host of Immigration Insider, Attorney John Nicelli.
Hi, my name is John Nicelli. I'm an immigration attorney in New York City. I've been practicing for over 40 years, exclusively in the field of immigration. And today I want to talk about a subject which is going to affect many thousands of people that are currently in the United States. And basically, there have been a number of programs known as temporary protected status, commonly known as TPS. There's DACA, Deferred Action for childhood arrivals. And there are some other programs that were previously in effect and now are canceled. And I'm going to speak about those programs as well today. So I'm going to start with TPS, which is temporary protected status. So temporary protected status is a temporary status given to people in the United States, which was authorized by the United States Congress in 1990. So the way it works, when Congress passed a very big immigration bill in 1990, they authorized the Attorney General of the United States to grant temporary protected status to certain individuals. Now, those individuals, the reason for temporary protected status is because there's many countries in the world that suffering many different tragedies. For example, maybe there's armed conflict, there may be an environmental disaster, there may have been some extraordinary earthquake, or it could have been a hurricane, it could have been a monsoon, or some extraordinary event that's taking place or took place in that country. So what's happened is that when earthquakes and floods and different things and armed conflict happen in countries, there's always a surge of immigrants coming to the United States, and many come here illegally, obviously, because they have no means of getting a visa, especially if the consulate is damaged or not even in existence there, because it was destroyed perhaps by an earthquake, and many other reasons. So to avoid people from doing that, the United States Congress authorized the Attorney General to act whenever they see crises like this. And also it allows people that are presently in the United States to get a status. So Congress has always been interested in letting people come to the United States legally as opposed to coming illegally. So they created this program. So the temporary protected status program is a program which allows a person from certain countries to remain in the United States in a lawful status. So no matter how you may have arrived here, they even paroled you in it for certain countries, you're allowed to work in the United States for a period of time. Most of the time, temporary protected status is anywhere from a year to 18 months, the majority of times. And then after that period of time expires, 30 days before it expires, you should be filing for renewal if Congress has authorized, or the Attorney General actually has authorized through Congress, an extension of the program. Now, one of the problems that we've had with these programs that many people are opposed to is that programs were started many years ago. For example, in El Salvador, there was a major earthquake, and there were some other problems many years ago. And there was also other problems in Nicaragua. Well, Nicaragua, I think, was more of a political problem, the same with Honduras. So what happened, because of these various tragedies, Congress authorized this program through the Attorney General for example, El Salvador to come to the United States. The problem is that the problem that originally existed no longer exists, and 20 years have gone by. In some cases, even 30 years have gone by. Yet, the United States has always keeps extending temporary protected status to people that are here. So now what's happened is Congress, with the Trump administration, has threatened to cancel many of these programs because they say they're really ineffective and somewhat illegitimate in their minds. And the reason why they claim that is because they say, well, the reason for having temporary protected status was to protect people and prevent them from going back to those countries where there's some kind of a crisis. But if the crisis no longer exists, why are we still giving temporary protected status to people? So there's been a big political uproar about that. And I expect there's going to be many of these programs will be canceled in the future. So, and I will get into that in a few minutes. Right, currently, there's a few designated countries that have TPS, and namely they are El Salvador, Haiti, Venezuela, Honduras, the Ukraine, Burma, Ethiopia, Nepal, Nicaragua, and the South Sudan. So, for example, Ukraine was designated a TPS country because of the war in the Ukraine. So if you were Ukrainian and you were in the United States, you were allowed to remain in the United States under this program of temporary protected status. For the Ukrainians, what they also did is they allowed another program to parole certain Ukrainians from the Ukraine into the United States if they wanted to come here, and then eventually their families members will be able to come here. I expect that program, once the war is over, will immediately be canceled by this next coming administration. So the problem is Congress doesn't want to allocate funds for these programs, and they feel that if there's no real crisis in the countries like there was, there's no reason to continue it. So what they fail to realize is that one of the reasons that Congress authorized these programs is because it all involves money. What happens is that the people that are in the United States, that are, say you have a Honduran, a Haitian, a Venezuelan, whoever it may be, they're here working, they're now authorized to work. Many of them are authorized to travel, so they travel back and forth to their countries as well. So what is that doing? By working, they're paying taxes, hopefully. They're sending money back to their countries to help their relatives that are in those countries. They're traveling, so that's commerce that's involved. And it's a big boom to the economy, not only in the United States, but in the foreign country that was designated as TPS. So by people that are here sending funds or clothing or cars, whatever it may be, to their relatives, that's reducing the dependence of that country on the United States, because now they're self-supporting through their own citizens. So that's one of the reasons behind the scenes that they have TPS designation for a lot of countries. But as I said, it's going to be law taken away from many countries, for some for good reason, but some for political reason, which is very unfortunate. Now, to qualify for TPS, you have to basically be a person of good moral character. You can't have a felony conviction, and you can't have two misdemeanor convictions. So you have to be physically present in the United States for specific periods of time, and you have to remain here for most of that time, or the overwhelming majority of that time. So if the program is for 18 months and you have a TPS designation, and then you get permission to travel, and you travel to your country and you stay there for 1 year, and then you come back for another few months, I suspect that you will be definitely denied TPS in the future. And I expect if immigration realizes it, they will withdraw your TPS designation and take it away from you because you've been out of the country too long. So you must file during the specific periods of time that are allowed for each country, because each country is different. And when the renewal comes up, if there is a renewal, you must file at least 30 days before the renewal period expires. That's pretty critical. Now, TPS is also similar to DACA, where DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. In those cases, children who basically were brought here, as many as infants, they were brought here before age 15, I believe it was, and they can qualify for DACA if they're in the United States, and they have to meet certain criteria, which is date of arrival, the age that you are when you filed, and things like that. So, for example, if you want to file for DACA and you're 30 years old now and you never filed before, you're not going to be eligible because there are age limitations as to the requirements to when you file. So that's another important thing. DACA is something that the Congress has expressed, and so has the next president, that they want to legalize the children that have DACA. But it becomes a political football because everybody has a different solution for the problem. It's very sad that children who have been here, I have many clients who've been here since they're infants. They came when they were 2 months old. And it's not their fault that their parents brought them here when they were 2 months old. And they're no different than an American citizen who was born in the United States. They've gone to school here, they work here, they don't even know the country they came from because they've never been there. So there's no reason to send them back. Okay, it's ridiculous. So there's been a big uproar in Congress about how to resolve the problem. There are some congressmen and senators say, oh, we have to have a path to citizenship. Doesn't make them citizens. That's not the way to go. There's others say, no, they were brought here illegally. They should go back. It doesn't matter. Those are the hardliners. And then there's others that say, well, maybe we can have a program of some type to legalize them in some manner. So because there's so much conflict and disagreement, nothing's ever been done. So they talk about doing it, but unfortunately, the way Congress works, many times they do nothing. But hopefully at some time in the future, something will be done, because a lot of these children, and now they're adults, are eligible for residency, at least they should be. And many have been contributing members to society. Many have good professional positions. Many have businesses here. They own homes here. They have adult children here, even small children here. They're no different than an average American citizen. In fact, in some cases, they've been very successful in accomplishing many goals that any American would want to accomplish. And that should be respected. And as I said, hopefully Congress will wake up one day and do something. Now, there's been other programs. For example, I can think of one program in the late 1980s. There was a program called Extended Voluntary Departure. And that was basically for Polish people and Hungarians. And what it was for, it was because it was the Solidarity movement in Poland. So because of the political turmoil there and the economic turmoil there, Congress decided that they would have this program called Extended Voluntary Departure. So it basically works as TPS, same thing. You stay here, you meet the criteria, you were here by a certain date, and haven't gotten in any major trouble or anything, you get this extended voluntary departure. So what happened with that program? So then things started changing in Poland, where things were getting better. Walesa became president. So then there was a lot of political turmoil at the time about that. So then they decided they were going to designate another program for the Polish citizens. And that was called Deferred Enforced Departure. It's a fancy name for basically the same exact program. But what happened at the end? So after a certain period of time, I don't know, it was a year or two, that people were eligible, the program ended. And that's when the problems start, and that's what's going to happen now, what I predict in the future. When the program ended, people were told that they had to leave the country within 30 days. And if they didn't leave the United States within 30 days, then they were put in deportation proceedings. Because at that time it was deportation proceedings, now it's called removal proceedings. And then you'd eventually have to see an immigration judge. So depending on how long you were here and what family members you have here and what kind of job you have and many other factors would determine what your eligibility was to remain in the United States. So seeing a judge is not necessarily a death sentence, because many people have family ties here. Maybe they're married to citizens or residents. Maybe they have children who are now older. Maybe they have children that have specific handicaps, or spouses that have some kind of a handicap or an illness or disease or something. So they may be eligible. At that time, it was called suspension of deportation, where you had to be here at least 7 years. Now it's called cancellation of removal. You have to be here minimum 10 years. And basically, the criteria is the same. You have to pay taxes, have a qualifying relative with some type of a need, whether it be a disease, a handicap, an educational need, or whatever it may be. There's many, many criteria which are too extensive to go into in this broadcast. But the bottom line is that people at the end of the program either left or were put in deportation proceedings. So if you were put in deportation or now removal proceedings, which will happen with if they end TPS for Honduras and somebody's in El Salvador and some of these other countries, what's going to happen is these people will be put in deportation proceedings and removal proceedings rather. So what happens is that they'll have to see, and if they don't leave, they'll have to see a judge. And then at that point, they'll determine what they're eligible for. Now, one of the good things about the temporary protected status program was that if you were deported, you had an order of deportation, but you were still here, you can remain in the United States and still have temporary protected status and remain with that old order of deportation and continue to work. So there's a lot of Salvadorans that were deported many years ago, some of them 20 or 30 years ago, and are still in the United States. But now they're contributing members of society, working, paying taxes, and whatever. But those people have a problem because immigration now, once they enter the program, immigration has their names, and they can then come after them and actually deport them if they have old orders of deportation. So the only way you would prevent that from happening is you have to file a stay of deportation to prevent the deportation order, or and it's no guarantee it's going to be granted. And if it's not granted, obviously it could be appealed, which is another long-term process. Or you can do what they call motions to reopen. So if a person's situation has changed, perhaps when they were deported, they were 20 years old. Now that same person may be 35 or 40. Maybe they have older children. Maybe they got married. There's many things they may be eligible for. So that would be a grounds for basis of reopening their case, depending on the circumstance. And we've had many cases reopened for people who have been deported in the past. But again, it depends on the circumstance. And we did one just recently, just a few days ago, where I've actually legalized this whole family. And this family, what happens is they were from the Philippines. And there were the man had filed for his, I believe it was 5 children. So if you're from the Philippines and your parent files for you and he's a citizen, it takes many years for you to become a resident, probably at least 15 to 20 years or more. So these family members who were like in their 20s now, all waited all these years to become residents. They were living in the United States illegally, and they wanted to. No, they were living in the Philippines, and they desperately wanted to come to the United States, but their father was living in the United States. So after so many years, they finally got scheduled for a visa appointment. The problem was 2 days before the visa appointment, the father got a heart attack and passed away. So technically, the visa petition is now dead. There's nothing you can do. So they went to the embassy and they said, "Where's your father?" So they said, "My father lives in the United States." But they didn't tell them that the father was deceased in the United States. He was in the cemetery. So that was a problem. So they ended up getting visas because the council didn't know anything, and they just assumed that the man was still alive living in the United States. So they come to the United States, they get admitted, everything is fine. But then what happens? The sister who was living in the United States writes to the embassy to say, "Listen, we have this situation here that my father died. I don't know what to do with my brothers and sisters." But that letter didn't arrive at the consulate until after, the embassy rather, they didn't arrive until after they had been granted the visas. So once they were granted the visas and they came to the United States and they got the letter, then the embassy notified the local immigration, and then that was the end of them getting a green card. So what happened was they checked on their green cards, and then when they went to immigration, made an appointment for them to come in to discuss their situation. And when they went there, all of them were apprehended and placed in deportation proceedings. So these people, after they were deported, they never left the United States. They stayed here, they disappeared, they moved to different states, and immigration never found them, probably never looked for them. To make a long story short, this happened, I believe it was 96 and 97. Just this past week, we had a court hearing that were able to reopen the case because their situation had changed. And most of them had gotten married to U.S. citizens, now had children here. were established here for 20, 30 years. And when most judges see that and they understand the circumstance, many judges will allow you to stay in the United States, and they'll reopen their cases and allow them to just status. So the bottom line is that it's not a death sentence if they end the TPS program or any of the temporary programs, but it's something to be very cautious of, and you should prepare in anticipation that it may be canceled. Speak to an immigration lawyer like myself, who's qualified to answer your questions and your concerns regarding what do I do if my temporary status is ended by the incoming administration. It's best to always be prepared as best you can, know what to expect. So at least you have something maybe to worry about, maybe not to worry about, but at least you have a path and you understand what you may face in the future. You don't want anyone knocking on your door at 3 a.m, say, come with us. You want to be prepared for what the future is and do whatever is necessary to try to remain in the United States if you can. And that's about all for today. If you ever have any questions or want additional information, you can call my office at 212-227-8020, or you can send us an email at john@johnnicelli.com. You can check my website at johnnicelli.com. We have these podcasts on the website and a tremendous amount of information about immigration. So I wish you all luck, and we all hope for a good situation in the future with the new administration. You have to think positive, no matter how much negativity seems to be out there today. All right, thanks very much, and good luck to all of you.
You've been tuning into Immigration Insider with your host, attorney John Nicelli. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, johnnicelli.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.